Hello my friends, in today's little history video we're going to learn about this guy right here, the MP40 or Maschinenpistole WWII, and how this simple piece of equipment changed the world, or at least the world of firearms in the 20th century. Now that might sound like a bit of an exaggeration, but listen to the story and decide for yourself, and then let me know what you think down in the comments below. So our story today is not going to start with the MP40 itself, but rather with its great-grandpa, the MP18. As the name would suggest, the MP18 originally entered production way back in 1918 and saw service with the German army during the waning months of World War I. And at the time, this was a groundbreaking piece of technology. The genesis of the MP18 program began back in 1915, and to fully understand the weapon and why it was so important, we have to put ourselves in the mindset of the folks developing this weapon at the time. At this point, the First World War has been raging across Europe for over a year now, and the defining characteristics of that conflict as we know it today have already been set. Both sides are digging in for long periods of stalemate, sitting in miles of trenches, enduring endless artillery barrages, interrupted only by brief flashes of action charging across no man's land in an attempt to capture enemy positions. And accordingly, weapons manufacturers on both sides are desperately trying to come up with whatever new equipment they can devise to help their forces break that stalemate. So in 1915, an organization called the German Rifle Testing Commission begins work on a development program to come up with a new weapon specifically designed for close quarters combat and trench raiding. Early attempts at modifying existing weapons like the .08 Luger and the Mauser C96 don't yield the results that the team wants, and the commission decides that they need to effectively start from scratch. And what ends up happening is a small group of designers, including Hugo Schmeisser, Theodor Bergmann, and others, develop what many consider to be the very first submachine gun, the MP18. The weapon they end up creating is a relatively heavy and bulky weapon, coming in at around 11 pounds fully loaded versus the 9 pounds of the main German service rifle of the day, and just under 3 feet long. But the MP18's open bolt blowback design offers a fully automatic rate of fire at around 500 rounds per minute and utilizes the existing 32-round 9mm Parabellum snail magazine originally designed for the Luger. This is a tremendous force multiplier for the German infantrymen who will receive this weapon. It's small enough to be highly mobile and comfortably operated by a single man. Around 4,000 of these weapons see combat with the German troops before the end of World War I, and the MP18 proves to be highly effective in its purpose-built role of close quarters combat and trench warfare. Now, how does this early success of the MP18 relate to our friend, the MP40 here? Well, the end of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles largely put the kibosh on mass submachine gun production for Germany for the next decade or so, but the concept of the submachine gun is here to stay. Little do the Germans know, but the Americans across the pond are developing their own unrelated submachine gun around the same time. The American version doesn't reach the delivery stage until after World War I, so none of these weapons see service during the Great War, but it will go on to have a huge impact on the next World War, and that gun, of course, is the Thompson submachine gun. In the 20s, Hugo Schmeisser keeps tinkering with his submachine gun designs, and eventually produces an improved version of his Great War design called the MP28. Now, the Germans still can't make a ton of MP28s because of the Versailles restrictions on fully automatic weapons, but they're still learning about SMG design and production. So let's fast forward now to the 1930s. The German government is under new management, so to speak. The Treaty of Versailles has been effectively ripped up, and the Wehrmacht is mobilizing for war. In 1938, another weapons manufacturer by the name of Heinrich Vollmer takes the lessons learned from Hugo Schmeisser's MP18 and MP28, as well as his own earlier design, the MP36, and creates the MP38. The MP38 is a simple, small, open-bolt blowback submachine gun with some really innovative design elements, and when the Germans finally invade Poland in September of 1939, many of those troops are armed with MP38s. The MP38 proves right off the bat to be very successful, and Heinrich Vollmer immediately begins work on a successor that will incorporate all of the learnings about submachine guns thus far and create the weapon that you see before you, the MP40. When Allied forces begin to encounter the MP38 and the MP40 in combat, they've never seen anything quite like this before. Sure, the Allies have submachine guns. The Brits have essentially a license-built copy of the MP28 called the Lanchester. The French have some of their own Mas 38s, and the still neutral Americans at this point have the Thompson, many of which have been sold to Allied nations already. But most of these Allied submachine guns are still rather intricate, complex pre-war designs. The MP40 is a weapon built not only for war, but with the restrictions and hardships of wartime production in mind. The MP40 is simplicity itself. First off, the weapon is made almost entirely of stamped steel parts, hugely helping to cut down on both costs and skilled labor production time. Production of contemporaries of the MP40 require considerable man-hours spent on creating highly precise milled parts, whereas the MP40 keeps the necessity for milled parts to an absolute minimum. The MP38 still featured a decent amount of detailed machine parts, but nearly all of these are foregone or simplified for the MP40. The receiver of the MP40 is stamped steel. Nearly the whole weapon is constructed using spot welding. and it's a sturdy little thing. On top of that, there's not a lick of wood hardware anywhere on this weapon. The pistol grip and the hand grip are both made of a synthetic product called margalite or bakelite, which is effectively a non-conductive heat-resistant resin that can be formed into pretty much any shape imaginable. And the MP40 takes great consideration into its size and mobility for the German infantrymen. The MP38 and the MP40 are the world's very first submachine guns to utilize an underslung folding stock, reducing the compact size of the weapon to just over 2 feet long. And all of these features add up to a weapon that not only serves its purpose extremely well in the field like its predecessors, the MP18 and the MP28, but now it's dirt cheap and extremely simple to make. In 1940, the Germans can make an MP40 for the equivalent of about $23 compared to $210 for an early model Thompson. This is revolutionary, and because of this, the Germans are able to produce nearly 1.1 million of these guns by war's end. Now, in the beginning of the video, I said that this weapon changed everything. And that's because by 1940, all the other nations engaged in the Second World War see the MP40 and immediately realize how valuable of a concept this is. If you can save a ton of money by producing a simple stamped steel, fully automatic weapon that you can give to as many soldiers as you'd like, that is huge. In 1941, the British start work on a new submachine gun program to start rapidly replacing weapons lost after the disastrous French campaign and the evacuation of Dunkirk. They studied captured examples of the MP40 and take its Spartan simplicity to the next level, creating the Sten gun. By 1941, Commonwealth forces have access to a fully automatic infantry weapon that can be produced for just $10. In the Soviet Union, Russian designers take the already highly successful PPS-H41 and simplify it even further with the PPS-43. The PPS is designed just like the MP40, nearly all stamped steel construction, underslung stock to save space, no wooden hardware. And through this weapon, the Soviets are able to cut the manpower time spent milling parts for the PPS-H41 from over 7 hours down to just 3 hours with the PPS. In the United States, designers have managed to simplify the Thompson SMG considerably, to such an extent that it now can be manufactured for around $45 a unit, but it's still relatively large, and at 10 pounds and 2.5 feet long, it's kind of a bulky weapon. The American Army Ordnance Board sees what's going on in Europe with the MP40 and now with the Sten gun, and they decide to develop their own bare-bones, cheap and effective stamped steel all-metal submachine gun to eventually replace the Thompson. The result ends up being the M3 grease gun, which the US can now produce in bulk at the low cost of $15 per unit. Back in Germany itself, Hugo Smizer is able to come up with a simple stamped steel selective fire intermediate cartridge rifle called the STG-44 that becomes the world's first combat assault rifle. When the war finally ends in 1945, production ceases on the MP40, but her legacy is clearly written. Hundreds of thousands of captured MP40s end up being sold to militaries and paramilitary groups all over the world. They end up all over Europe, in Israel, in Vietnam, in Zimbabwe. And the simplicity of the MP40's design would go on to influence arms manufacturers the world over for decades to come. Some post-war weapons like the M56 Yugoslavian SMG or the Spanish Z45 took elements directly from the MP40, and others, like the legendary AK family of weapons, borrowed other details, including the MP40's underslung folding stock. Eugene Stoner leverages a phenolic composite resin similar to the margalite used for the MP40 in development of his legendary M16 stock, pistol grip, and handguard to reduce weight while still delivering a strong product. And the stamped steel design would also go on to influence the most widely produced submachine gun ever made, the Israeli Uzi. The MP40's success and legacy of innovation was a result of decades of research and development to find the perfect balance of simplicity, cost-effectiveness, and upstanding service. Had the MP40 not been adopted and mass-produced by the German military in World War II, it's hard to say how the history of arms manufacturing might have played out. So, what do you think? Did the MP40 change everything? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you'd like to learn about some more iconic pieces of military equipment that served in the Second World War, you can do so right here.